Chapter 11. Pseudoscience and Hysteria Triumph. There is nothing to fear except the persistent refusal to find out the truth, the persistent refusal to analyze the causes of happenings. Dorothy Thompson, 1894–1961. There is an incredible amount of information and misinformation available both in paper form and on the Internet about the history, function and temperament of the American Pit Bull Terrier. This plethora of information consists of everything from factual data to hysterical diatribes and unsubstantiated theories about pit bull temperament and anatomy. Politicians, prosecutors, attorneys, newspaper reporters, TV and radio station personalities, breeders, trainers, animal control officers, veterinarians, shelter workers, dog fighters, street thugs, and just about anyone able to speak has an opinion or personal theory about the strength and temperament of the American Pit Bull Terrier. These opinions and theories are based on a dizzying mixture of personal experience, media-induced images, rumors, myths, speculation, fear-mongering, and personal or political agendas. Professionals, too, can have diametrically opposed viewpoints and opinions about pit bulls. Police officers are more inclined toward encountering bad owners, criminals and their aggressively encouraged dogs, and often see only the bad pit bulls. Veterinarians often have a positive image of pit bulls since in their profession they more frequently encounter these dogs in stressful situations, pain, fear, with strangers, and recognize the extreme tolerance found in pit bulls. If you have no personal experience with pit bulls, then your only information is acquired from newspapers' headlines, and it is not difficult to understand how people have formed a very negative opinion of pit bulls with the media as their only source of knowledge about the breed. Not until false claims, both of anatomical and behavioral issues, are cast aside, not until breed identification issues are addressed, and not until the circumstances that contributed to dog attacks are examined can aggression be addressed in a way which may provide viable solutions and offer preventive measures to decrease the number of attacks on humans. Solutions to canine aggression are doomed to fail if they are based on facts not founded on evidence or on unproven claims of canine anatomy or behavior. Unfortunately, much of the information presented about pit bulls falls under the category of pseudoscience. Pseudoscience can best be described as information presented as fact, with the appearance of a scientific basis, which, however, is found upon examination to have no evidence supporting such claims. Claims of anatomical abnormalities, for instance, seem to have a ring of truth about them. The fact that a tangible physical feature is the source of a theory or fact would seem to suggest there is tangible physical evidence to support this. In other words, the jaw of an animal is a tangible feature, it can be seen, touched and examined. Claims of abnormalities in such a visible feature seem to be based in reality because, seriously, why would these claims be quoted and widely believed if they can so easily be disproved? Pit bulls and the locking jaw myth. The Doberman was purported to have anatomical abnormalities, brain size versus skull size, which rendered it dangerous and unpredictable, setting it apart from other breeds of dog. To upstage the Doberman, another breed would also need an anatomic abnormality which set it apart from other breeds in its ferocity. The pit bull arrived on the scene in the early 1980s with not one, but multiple rumored anatomical features which quickly outclassed the Doberman in their ability to frighten and shock the public. The first anatomical claim to fame about the pit bull was the myth of the locking jaws. This theory suggests that the pit bull has a unique jaw and dental structure which allows it to lock onto their victim. While pit bulls do have a specialized and manipulated trait which allows them to exhibit tenacity and perseverance in maintaining their grip, from their bulldog ancestor, this is not sufficient to propel the breed into super-predator status. After all, while pit bulls, and bulldogs, had this ability to hold for well over a century, prior to 1980, other breeds were considered far more vicious than the pit bull. All breeds of dogs have a particular trait or appearance which sets them apart from other breeds. The new breed that, we love to hate, would have to have much more impressive credentials than just a specialized ability to hold on tenaciously. They would have to have an evil design which would allow for this ability. And an inescapable locking jaw is just such an evil-sounding device. This is a classic example of a belief that has no factual or scientific basis. The locking jaw mechanism is a myth. But this myth was as easily bought into by the public as was the myths about the bloodthirsty nature of the bloodhound and the Doberman brain size. It is not terribly difficult to see how easily this was accomplished and how fervently people hold on to their beliefs once they accept them. The myth of the bloodhound's bloodthirsty ferocity was a rather easy sell. The breed was mostly used to track down unsavory persons or in the cruel pursuits of their masters. Being chased or set on by dogs taps into humans' instinctive and primal fear of being prey. The name, bloodhound, certainly held a negative connotation and many people confused or misunderstood the true definition of the term. Bloodhounds were defined as a hunter of blood, not a hunter by blood. To some, this distinction may seem trivial, but in reality there is a vital difference. The bloodhound tracked warm-blooded animals, but was not following a blood trail, not thirsting after blood. As discussed previously, the Tom shows did much to reinforce this bloodthirsty image. A generation later, with images of Dobermans and Nazi Germany still fresh in the minds of the public, anyone taking even a cursory look at a Doberman's rather narrow skull could easily buy into the "skull too small dog goes mad" theory. The media showing any attack or guard dog as a snarling Doberman helped fix this image of viciousness. In the 1980s, the broad head and square jaw of the pit bull easily sold a whole new generation of people into the locking jaw theory. All these theories sound like they have a scientific basis, and that there must be evidence on which these beliefs are based. The truth is, there isn't. There are no scientific studies or evidence which validates any of these widely held beliefs. On the contrary, there are several written statements by experts definitively refuting the locking jaw theory. Dr. Howard Evans, Professor Emeritus, College of Veterinary Medicine at Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, and author of the world's definitive work on canine anatomy, Anatomy of the Dog, in conjunction with Dr. Sandy de la Junta, one of the foremost dog neurologists in the country, along with Dr. Catherine Haupt, a leading dog behaviorist, wrote the following statement about the locking jaw. In pit bulls, we all agree that the power of the bite is proportional to the size of the jaws and the jaw muscles. There is no anatomical structure that could be a locking mechanism in any dog. Research on the functional morphology of the jaws of various dog breeds conducted by Dr. I. Blair Brisbane of the University of Georgia showed that there were no mechanical or morphological differences between the jaws of American Pit Bull Terriers and those of any of the other comparable breeds of dogs which we studied. In addition, we found that the American Pit Bull Terriers did not have any unique mechanism that would allow these dogs to lock their jaws. Clamps with front teeth and grind/chews with back teeth myth. This is a carryover from the old 1800s bulldog myth. Jack London may have unintentionally contributed greatly to this myth with the publication of his novel White Fang. In his classic theme, Wild Animal vs. Dog, we find a wolf pitted against a bulldog. In Lon Don's telling of this lengthy and protracted battle, the bulldog's fighting technique in defeating the wolf is described in part as, the jaws shifting their grip, slightly relaxing and coming together again in a chewing movement. The wolf is described as at a loss to defend itself against the bulldog's tactics as he did not know the chewing method of fighting, nor were his jaws adapted to it. But, as one reader in 1908 pointed out, Mr. London displays an innocence about dog fighting, which does him credit. The reader, apparently intimately familiar with dog fighting, explains in great detail how the bulldog is not truly a fighting dog, and that the breed's function and physical appearance was designed to bait or hold on to bulls and not for fighting. The author then describes the creation and capabilities of what he believes to be the true fighting breed, the Bull Terrier, a question of bulldogs and fakers. President Roosevelt and Jack London seem to forget that the bulldog is not really a fighter. New York Times, November 1, 1908. The grinding/chewing jaw capability is just another of the many myths which surrounded the bulldog a century ago, and which has carried over into the new pit bull mythology. Neither bulldogs, pit bulls, nor any other breed of dog have a jaw structure that would allow for gripping with their front canine teeth and simultaneously grinding or chewing with their back molar teeth. Pit bull bite force calculated in psi, pounds per square inch, myth. Another physical ability alleged to set the pit bull apart from all other breeds of dogs, and even surpass the capabilities of many wild carnivores, is the claim of massive biting power, measured in psi, or pounds per square inch of force. A disturbing number of newspaper reporters, attorneys, politicians, physicians, and testosterone-driven websites discussing pit bulls advance outrageous claims of pit bull biting power in terms of psi. Claims of 1,200 psi, 1,800 psi, 2,000 psi, and even 2,600 psi are quoted and bantered about regularly in discussions on pit bulls. And like the locking jaw mechanism, though widely believed, none can cite a reputable source for this information. Extensive research on the subject of pit bull biting force reveals only one medical journal reference on the psi of pit bulls. The information, or rather misinformation, is startling and unsettling in that it is printed in a scientific journal without supporting data. Mauling by Pit Bull Terriers, Case Report, is an article presented in 1989 by 4 medical doctors on the multidisciplinary management of a child presented with extensive soft tissue damage as the result of an attack by 4 pit bull terriers. The authors of this article state, pit bulls bite with greater force than most dogs, up to 1,800 pounds per in. They cite their sole reference for this claim as, Boning, D.A., Fleischer, Gr., Campos, J.M., Dog Bites in Children. A.M. J. Emergency. Med. 1, 17-21, 1983. Examination of this cited report, Dog Bites in Children, 3 reveals an extensive medical article written on the management and treatment of dog bites in children. No mention or reference whatsoever is found to pit bulls, biting force, or dog breeds within this article. Their source cited for the psi claim is nothing more than a red herring. The authors of the original report, Mauling by Pit Bull Terriers, make other unsettling and unsubstantiated claims about pit bull anatomy when they state, once they have their victim in a hold, they do not merely maintain the bite, but continue to grind their premolars and molars into the tissue while the canine teeth stabilize the hold. Despite the proclamations of these human doctors, this simply is not true. Pit bull anatomy, jaw structure, dentition, biting/chewing behaviors and abilities are no different than any other breed of dog, perhaps with the exception of some of the brachiocephalic or extremely short-nosed breeds. Pit bulls, and all other breeds of dogs, have an upper jaw, maxilla, and a lower jaw, mandible, neither of which have movable parts, or joints, meaning that if the back molars in the upper jaw are moving, so are the front canine teeth in the upper jaw. The front canine teeth cannot be unmoving or stable, while the back molars are moving, grinding, as they are fixed on the same bone, maxillary bone. The same is true of the lower jawbone or mandible. Misinformation and unsubstantiated claims about pit bull anatomy and abilities published in medical journals is profoundly disturbing. Once inaccurate and unsupported data is published in a science journal, all future studies which reference this source become fundamentally flawed. Doctors who treat human patients, in reporting on dog attack cases in medical journals, continue to reference each other in a never-ending succession, building on one false and unsubstantiated claim made in 1989. These unproven claims have even been entered into official court documents as evidence of the destructiveness of the pit bull bite. Needless to say, any conclusions about the type of injuries inflicted by pit bulls found in a medical journal article that cites this inaccurate source, pit bulls bite with a force of 1,800 pounds per in, are invalid. Recently, Dr. Brady Barr of National Geographic did a study on animal bites. Domestic dogs and humans were tested along with wild animals. The results seem more feasible and within the parameters of reason. The force of bite in the test subjects was recorded as humans, 120 pounds of bite pressure. Wild dogs, 310 pounds. Humans, 120 pounds of bite pressure. Lions, 600 pounds. White sharks, 600 pounds. Hyenas, 1,000 pounds. Snapping turtles, 1,000 pounds. Crocodiles, 2,500 pounds. Domestic dogs, 320 pounds of pressure on average. A German Shepherd, American Pit Bull Terrier and Rottweiler were tested using a bite sleeve equipped with a specialized computer instrument. The American Pit Bull Terrier had the least amount of pressure of the three dogs tested. In addition to the National Geographic study, other reliable sources have done studies on the psi of nonspecific breeds of dogs. It is generally agreed that all dogs bite at approximately 200 to 450 psi, the higher-end numbers apply to larger dogs. While these results seem within reason, bite force in animals is difficult to measure accurately. Variables which cannot be controlled include the individual animal's motivation to bite into a testing device and how hard the animal chose to bite. It is not possible to know if animals are biting with full force or if a bite is inhibited. According to Dr. I. Lair Brisbane of the University of Georgia. To the best of our knowledge, there are no published scientific studies that would allow any meaningful comparison to be made of the biting power of various breeds of dogs. There are, moreover, compelling technical reasons why such data describing biting power in terms of pounds per square inch can never be collected in a meaningful way. All figures describing biting power in such terms can be traced to either unfounded rumor or, in some cases, to newspaper articles with no foundation in factual data. Fortunately, an emergency room doctor in New York, seemingly unaware of the debate and rumors of biting force in pit bulls, allowed common sense to prevail when presented with a patient with severe bites. It was reported in the newspapers in the fall of 2003. A 37-year-old man entered Harlem Hospital, NYC, seeking treatment for bite wounds. The man claimed he had been bitten by a pit bull dog. An emergency room doctor, after examining the wounds, determined the injuries to the man could not have come from a dog bite, pit bull or otherwise. The wounded man abruptly left the hospital. Police officers later arrived at his apartment to find the animal responsible for the bites was a 400-pound, Bengal Siberian tiger the man was keeping as a pet in his Harlem housing project. Hormonal reactions, chemical imbalances, brain size and other neurological nonsense. None of the claims about chemical imbalances or brain pressure warrant serious discussion. These are outlandish assertions serving only to embellish the superpredator image of the pit bull and appear to be myths simply transposed from the Doberman onto the pit bull. Recently, a newspaper article stated that some experts even believe that the presence of hormones in children of puberty age can set off pit bulls. As with most of these outrageous claims, the source, some experts, is not cited. The questions which could be put to these experts are, how has it happened that pit bulls, exclusively, have come to acquire this ability to detect and react to pubescent hormones? And the even more compelling question, since preteens and teenagers, male and female, are vastly underrepresented in fatal dog attacks, what evidence supports such a theory? Preteens and teenagers are in one of the age groups least likely to be attacked and killed by any dog. Children under the age of 6 and the elderly are overwhelmingly the most frequent victims of severe/fatal dog attacks by any breed. Nonetheless, newspapers and editorials print this baseless nonsense. Suffice it to say, these are all untrue and there is no evidence whatsoever to support any claims of a chemical, neurological or puberty-based aggression exclusive to pit bulls. Pit bull attacks are like shark attacks. Pit bulls are land sharks. A first impulse is to simply dismiss these allegations as nonsensical because, like the exploding brain myth, they are so outlandish as to not warrant serious discussion. The fact that the city of Denver introduced the claim that pit bull attacks are like shark attacks as evidence for breed-specific legislation demonstrates how this kind of misinformation and shoddy research can wind up as fact in official court records. The fact that educated and not so educated people in positions to legislate and enact laws are making these claims necessitates addressing this theory as if it truly had any merit. From the poodle to the pit bull, all domestic dogs are descended from the same ancestor, the wolf. But the pit bull has seemingly accomplished an astounding genetic feat. It has singularly been able not only to surpass all traits found in its direct ancestor, the wolf, but has allegedly been able to bypass its own species and class and cross over to join the ranks with entirely different species and classes of animals, lions/tigers/sharks. Not only do pit bulls allegedly attack and bite like tigers, lions and sharks, but the implication is that they have also taken on the behaviors of these wild animals. In the interest of not belaboring similar inane theories, pit bulls are like tigers/lions, only the shark issue will be addressed, as this is the most commonly seen comparison to pit bull attacks. Shark anatomy/jaws, teeth, class, chondrichthyon. Sharks are cartilaginous fish. The shark's jaw exhibits characteristics unique in the animal kingdom. Unlike almost all other animals, and all mammals, the shark is equipped with two mobile and independent jaws, enabling it to attack large prey and tear off extensive pieces of flesh. This jaw structure allows for tremendous extensibility, enabling the animal to swallow some prey whole. In addition to a unique jaw structure, the shark has a set of teeth of which the anatomy and manner of replacement is unique in the animal world. While there are over 400 species of sharks and they differ significantly in dental formula, all sharks have at least 5 sets of teeth, covered to varying degrees with buccal mucous membrane. One set of teeth sits on the ridge of the jawbone, with at least 4 rows of teeth lined up behind the first, functional row. If one or more of the teeth on the functional row are broken or torn out, the corresponding teeth in the next row will rotate up to replace them. 8 For example, the white shark has 46 teeth arranged in 7 rows, not all of which are functional, for a total of 322 teeth. While shape and size of teeth vary among shark species, all sharks have serrated teeth. These teeth are edged or lined with smaller teeth, which are razor-sharp, rendering each tooth a veritable saw. Canine, pit bull, /jaws, teeth, class, Mammalia. Dogs are mammals. Unlike the shark, the dog does not have two mobile and independent jaws. The only mobile bone in the mammalian skull is the mandible, or lower jaw. The dental formula for the dog is 2, 1 3/3, C1/1, P4/4, M2/3, for a total of 42 teeth. Anatomically, the comparison between dogs and sharks could not be any more far-fetched. The dog does not have a jaw structure which allows it to swallow prey whole, nor does its jaw structure contain independent jaws, upper and lower. Unlike the shark, the dog's upper jaw is firmly attached to the skull. The dog's teeth are not serrated with razor-sharp edges, nor do they have rows of teeth positioned behind a primary set of functional teeth. Perhaps the persons who made the claim that pit bull attacks are like shark attacks will say that the comparison was not to be taken so literally, that they meant it as the manner of the attack, the nature of the attack, the behavior of the attack, or the injurious nature of the attack, when they compared pit bulls to sharks. The manner, nature, behavior, and injuries inflicted by sharks during an attack are driven by predation or feeding. Biting off large chunks of flesh, tearing and ripping are methods by which the shark obtains food. The comparison would have to end here, as no one can seriously believe pit bulls view humans as a food source. If an argument is made that the comparison was not to be taken literally at all, but was simply a metaphor, the question then becomes, how can comparing pit bulls to sharks help in the understanding, or prevention, of canine aggression? Well, it can't. Which leads to the following questions. What is the purpose of comparing pit bulls to sharks? Is this approach an effective way to address canine aggression? Since pit bulls do not behave, attack or have anatomical features which allow for any meaningful comparison with sharks, this cannot possibly be an effective way to address canine aggression. This leaves the remaining question about the purpose of this comparison. While some politicians appear to know very little about canine anatomy and aggression, and even less about shark anatomy, they do know how to promote themselves as effective and concerned lawmakers. The facts released about pit bulls by some politicians are not really facts, but rather tactics that alarm and frighten the public into buying into a quick and ineffectual approach to a complex human problem. Statements comparing pit bulls to sharks tap into a primal human fear of being attacked and eaten by large predators. These references are emotionally charged, attention-getting devices, capable of frightening a large segment of the public into believing that they are more likely to be killed by a roaming land shark, pit bull, than by driving to work in the morning. A jittery public sighs in relief when politicians tell them not to fear, for they have the problem within their grasp. They have legislation which will rid the streets of these men, aces, soothing the very fear they help to create. This is certainly not to suggest that all politicians are unconcerned with finding real preventive measures to control dangerous dogs. But those who instill fear in order to promote their agenda are either grossly ignorant of canine behavior or have questionable motives. Either way, this will not produce effective legislation to protect the public from dog attacks. Pit bulls are impervious to pain and therefore more dangerous during an attack. Because pit bulls have historically been bred to have an increased tolerance for pain, it would not be unreasonable to conclude that this would be a factor in severe/fatal dog attacks. There are also some documented cases where pit bulls appeared highly tolerant of pain and focused during an attack. But sweeping statements like this are never based on documented evidence of significant populations. Behaviors such as extreme tolerance to pain can be found in groups of dogs within a population, but it is equally easy to find groups of dogs within the pit bull population which have normal or even increased sensitivity to pain. Increased tolerance for pain is an unnatural or artificial trait within the breed and as such needs to be constantly selected for. Therefore, the number of pit bulls that are extremely tolerant to pain would depend largely on the recent breeding practices of humans, which cannot be determined. There are documented cases of pit bulls that were extremely difficult to disengage from an attack. There are documented cases of pit bull attacks which were thwarted when the dogs were struck with bats or shovels. There are documented cases of pit bull attacks which ceased when the animals were struck with sticks, curtain rods, hands, feet or other relatively ineffectual objects. And there are many cases of pit bulls attacking without much conviction, with the dog retreating at the shouts or mere appearance of another person. But these situations only demonstrate that there are many variables within any breed. It is well documented that other breeds of dogs, upon attacking in a severely aggressive manner, are also difficult to disengage. This could be seen as far back as the previously mentioned 1903 attack with the shepherd dog, during which the arrival of the wife, who struck the dog on the back with an axe, only maddened the dog even further. Even though the dog was frenzied, the arrival of the woman might very well have saved her husband's life, had she not struck him in the leg with the axe. Many severe pit bull attacks did not result in a fatality, precisely because of direct interference or thwarting of the attack. Attacks that resulted in a fatality overwhelmingly involved unsupervised children or elderly persons alone with the dogs, regardless of breed. The probability is not that a pit bull attack will result in a fatality because the dog could not be beaten off the victim, but simply because there was no one of significant force to do exactly that. While it may seem logical that increased tolerance to pain would be a significant factor in pit bull attacks, in reality it is not. Most dogs do not respond to pain while in the frenzied state of a severe attack. This is a behavior observed in many different breeds of dogs and is found repeatedly in many of the earlier examples given of dog attacks. However, forceful and direct intervention, by either separating or shielding the victim from the dogs, has prevented many a severe attack from becoming a fatality in both pit bull and other breed attacks. Again, this distinction is important, because claims of pit bulls being highly tolerant of pain easily turn into the misconception that pit bulls feel no pain. Recently, Chicago Alderman Rugai, in commenting on the reasons for introducing breed-specific legislation in her city, was quoted in the Chicago Tribune as saying, "Pit bulls feel no pain." 10 These kinds of outrageous comments do incalculable damage. Aside from the obvious repercussions pit bulls may suffer from this, humans can suffer as well. 100 years ago the media was reporting that dogs would attack in response to pain, thus educating people in the avoidance of attacks. Yet today the very persons who clamor so loudly about their desire to save people from pit bull, attacks disseminate information which is the antithesis to dog bite prevention. Pit bull attacks are unprovoked. Pit bulls attack without warning. This subject will be discussed in more detail in the chapter on media and interpretation of behavior as it relates to all breeds of dogs. However, as it relates to pit bulls, this is just another unsubstantiated claim which has been used to classify pit bulls as different. Pit bulls are alleged to attack without provocation as a result of their breeding and use as fighting dogs. Outrageous claims about pit bulls and provocation are found regularly. Statements that most pit bull attacks are unprovoked can be found from politicians, physicians, and others unschooled in canine behavior and unfamiliar with the circumstances preceding dog attacks. There are numerous reasons why claims of pit bulls, or any breed, attacking without provocation are baseless. The classification of an attack as unprovoked is usually based on the declarations of a negligent owner who does not care to understand canine behavior, an owner who is unable to understand, canine behavior, a busy owner who is too preoccupied with the tasks of daily living to see the signs and signals dogs usually display, or persons who deliberately misrepresent the facts to limit their culpability. Dogs have evolved over thousands of years, both from their ancestor the wolf, and as domesticated dogs in a human society, to be social animals. Social animals communicate by body language and with vocalization. Dogs do this with stares, body stiffening, positioning of ears, tail and head, and growling, to name only a few. Pit bulls do this as much as any other breed of dog. Only hubris allows humans to declare that a few generations of selective breeding of a small population of pit bulls, for fighting, can erase what thousands of years of evolution have created. While we certainly can find cases in which a pit bull seemingly attacked without displaying any warning signals, again this is not a phenomenon exclusive to pit bulls, and it certainly is not representative of most pit bull attacks. Additionally, since so many severe and fatal dog attacks, all breed, are on young, unsupervised children who cannot read or understand canine warning signals, this certainly leads one to question how these types of claims of attacking without warning can be taken seriously. As previously stated, there was only one recorded fatality by a pit bull-type dog in the United States from 1966 to 1975. The first fatal pit bull attack we find after this decade occurred in May 1976, when a 6-year-old girl wandered over to a pit bull chained under a carport at an apartment complex. It is worthy to note that neighbors stated they heard the attack and heard the dog growling, but assumed it was growling at another animal and did not respond. Only too late did they realize that these very clear signals of aggression were directed towards the child. The overwhelming majority of pit bulls in the United States cannot trace their lineage directly back to game-bred fighting dogs. And fortunately most pit bulls are not used for fighting but live, to varying degrees, in social environments where signals of fear, aggression, excitement, contentment, and friendliness are sent and received on a daily basis. Because humans attached to these dogs cannot, or care not. To read these signals does not mean they do not exist. Contrary to what the media and most owners of attacking dogs would have you believe, severe/fatal attacks by pit bulls are usually the end result of an escalation of a series of obvious aggressive behaviors. It is more within the nature of humans to lie about events that point to their culpability than it is within the nature of dogs to attack unprovoked. So, we find owners less than truthful about prior incidents of aggression or improper treatment of dogs when they are facing legal or civil action after their dog has severely or fatally injured someone. No owner is going to admit a pit bull attacked a child because it was kept on a heavy logging chain for 5 years, bred 2 times a year, was worm-infested and parasite-ridden, was teased by children and lived a miserable, lonely existence in the far corner of the backyard. The owner is going to tell police that the dog never showed any signs of aggressiveness. And if owners' comments are unreliable, media accounts of these events are even more so, as they are all too content to describe these dogs as family pets and print the abusive owner's cries of ignorance and denial. Another reason why statements about dog attacks being unprovoked are unreliable is because rarely do they take into account the familiar aspect that is so important from a dog's perspective. What may be provocation for one dog will not be provocation to another dog, depending on the relationship between the dog and the person. A clear example of this occurred in Tennessee in 2003 when a 4-year-old boy accompanied his grandfather to a nearby home. The boy had a Rottweiler at home, with which he was known to play very roughly. It was not uncommon for the boy to jump upon his dog and attempt to ride on the Rottweiler's back. Like true family dogs, the Rottweiler tolerated this child's rambunctious play good-naturedly. However, the home they were visiting also contained a Rottweiler along with another large mixed-breed dog. Neither of these intact, male dogs had any history of aggression, but, unfortunately, the boy went into the yard alone, and it is believed he attempted to play with these dogs in the same fashion as he would play with his pet Rottweiler. Clearly, the reactions of these dogs if the boy attempted to climb onto their backs would be different than the boy's pet Rottweiler. Did the boy mean to harm the dogs? Did he intentionally provoke them? Of course not. But from the dog's perspective, this easily could have been perceived as a threat. In 2004, the media reported this pit bull attacked and killed a 4-year-old boy. It was not reported that this chained, intact male dog was visibly underweight with numerous old scars on his head and neck. Veterinarian examination revealed the dog was heartworm positive, flea infested, and suffering from internal parasites, hookworms. He was anemic with a low-grade fever and was diagnosed as having very poor body condition and muscle mass. Stress and wear marks along the teeth suggest the dog did not receive adequate nutrition during development. The dog was poorly socialized and very fearful. The dog's perception which ultimately decided if the provocation was serious enough to warrant an attack. Owners and non-owners alike need to anticipate a dog's reaction or perception of provocation before an attack or deal with the consequences afterward. And this applies to pit bulls as much as any other breed of dog. Pit bulls are ticking time bombs. Pit bulls are ticking time bombs. Michael Bryant, Attorney General, Ontario, in defense of his legislation to ban pit bulls. The breed should be terminated as simply being a time bomb waiting to go off. Corey Nelson, Assistant City Attorney, Denver, Colorado. These comments are almost always used to support the claim that pit bulls are vicious, unpredictable, and need to be restricted or banned. This is blatant fear-mongering. It is as baseless as saying that pit bulls are land sharks, pit bulls have chemical imbalances, and other claims used by those who are so grossly unschooled in the subject of dog attacks and canine behavior that this is the only way they can address the issue. These statements are even more troubling when they are made by people who claim they have the interests of the public at heart, the very same people responsible for enacting laws to control dangerous dogs under the guise of safeguarding the public. Should the public feel safer when politicians enact dangerous dog legislation based on the ticking time bomb theory of canine behavior? Would we accept this one-dimensional, emotional argument from our children's fourth-grade teacher? Could a teacher tell a classroom of children that the Civil War started because men are inherently aggressive, or World War II started because men are evil? Would this be an acceptable teaching and learning tool? Do we solve problems or address issues effectively this way, or do we learn from examining both the major and subtle forces which preceded a war, or a dog attack? A breed apart or attacks unlike any other breed. Pit bulls are often accused of being inherently different from other breeds of dogs, both in anatomy, temperament, manner of attack and ferocity of attack. In any discussion about the dangerousness of pit bulls, the most frequently used evidence is the number of fatalities attributed to this breed and the description of the injuries to victims. But are pit bull attacks, in terms of physical injury to the victim and the potential to cause death, actually different than those of other breeds? Consider the cases of double human fatalities due to dog attacks. While fatal dog attacks are extremely rare, cases in which dogs have attacked and killed more than one victim during an attack are almost unheard of. However, over the last century, throughout the world, there are found 14 reported cases of double human fatalities during a single episode of a dog attack, 5 in the US, 2 in Canada, 1 in Mexico, 1 in Italy, 1 in France, 1 in Hungary, 1 in North Korea, 1 in South Africa, and 1 in Kenya. While most fatal attacks involve severe aggression, the aggression and ferocity of an attack by dogs resulting in the death of 2 victims during a single episode would have to be utterly extreme in nature and force. Yet, of the 14 cases of multiple deaths resulting from a single episode of a dog attack, not one of the dogs involved in these incidents was identified as a pit bull or a pit bull-type dog. Clearly, other forces are at work in these types of attacks that are unrelated to breed. Consider also that during the 20th century there have been over 450 documented cases of fatal dog attacks in the US by non-pit bull breeds. This would certainly suggest that either other breeds exhibit aggression similar to pit bulls, or pit bulls are exhibiting aggression similar to other dogs. One of the characteristics often used in claims that pit bull attacks differ in nature and force from other breed attacks is the shake, hold and tear manner of attack. In enacting a ban on pit bulls in 1989, the city of Denver proved that pit bulls inflicted more serious wounds than other breeds because they tend to attack the deep muscles, to hold, to shake, and to cause ripping of tissue. As far back as 1875, descriptions of dogs holding, shaking and tearing their victims could be found. The word torn is actually the most frequently found description of dog bite wounds during the last century. A fatal attack on a little girl by a large mongrel occurred in 1875. The dog is described as having teeth fastened into the child, and was shaking her furiously. In 1893 a vivid description was given of a woman killed by a mastiff. The article reports that the woman was viciously attacked and lying on the ground when help arrived. Mrs. Morrison was lying on the ground unconscious, and the angry brute, with his teeth buried in her flesh, was standing over and worrying her. When the men approached, the dog seemed to grow more furious. An attempt was made to beat him off with clubs, but he refused to let go his hold, and at each blow from a club he shook his victim so that it was feared he would kill her. After some delay a pistol was obtained and the brute was shot, but only after he received a second bullet did he release his hold on the woman. The Daily Advocate, February 15, 1893. The next year, a fatal attack by a Newfoundland is described in great detail. In Chicago, a young boy, Tommy O'Hara, was playing with a Newfoundland and the dog turned and attacked the boy. The report describes many of the typical behaviors found in severe/fatal attacks. During the progress of the terrible attack on the child, a small brother and sister appeared on the scene and the maddened brute turned on them momentarily and inflicted cruel wounds. But his rage seemed to be against the boy Tommy, and he turned again and seized the little one in his teeth, shaking him until he was almost lifeless. Herald Dispatch, March 3, 1894. The canine behavior of holding and shaking during a severe attack continues to appear in recorded dog attacks throughout the century. In 1965, a 4-year-old boy died after being attacked by a Labrador Retriever. The dog was tied to a picnic table and when the boy approached the dog, the black Labrador seized and shook him. Adults nearby could not intervene quickly enough to save the boy from the fatal head injuries inflicted by the dog. There are untold numbers of other cases involving many breeds and types of dogs involved in these behaviors, tearing, shaking, and holding, during an attack, seen consistently over the last century. Throughout the history of the human/dog bond, owners have witnessed their puppies or adult dogs vigorously shaking and tearing at everything from stuffed toys to captured small animals. For the city of Denver to claim this is a behavior exclusive to pit bulls demonstrates how statements made with no factual basis can easily wind up in official court records, especially in a climate of fear and hysteria. Statements that pit bulls inflict wounds unlike those of other dogs display unfamiliarity with post-mortem reports of victims of other breed attacks. It is not necessary to provide the graphic details of autopsy results of pit bull victims versus non-pit bull victims. The fact is, they are indistinguishable. It is impossible to examine an autopsy report of a dog attack victim and determine what breed of dog inflicted the injuries. Clearly, other breeds can and do inflict injuries so grievous and profound as to cause fatalities. For centuries farmers have been plagued by livestock losses due to predation by loose roaming dogs. As recently as the 1970s, newspapers were full of stories of dogs attacking all types of farm animals, from 2 Labrador Retrievers breaking into a pen and killing 900 chickens in Oregon to a pack of large mixed-breed dogs attacking a herd of 26 young Holstein bulls in Maryland, killing one and severely mauling another. Wild animals also regularly fall prey to loose roaming dogs and, during the previous decades, local newspapers were often reporting the yearly number of deer kills caused by dogs. As people lose touch with the natural world, we allow ourselves to be convinced by sensationalized newspaper headlines that only certain breeds are capable of participating in these types of attacks. In 2001, a woman witnessed 4 domestic dogs attacking a large buck off a rural North Carolina roadside. The dogs circled the deer, then began jumping and tearing at the flesh from the deer's neck. Distressed at witnessing this attack, the woman immediately called authorities. Officials responded, capturing 3 of the dogs and shooting the gravely injured buck. The owner of 2 of the dogs expressed surprise and dismay in learning that his 2 Labrador mixed breeds had participated in this brutal attack. However, faced with reality, the man was forced to acknowledge that the breed of dog mattered little, as Labradors, like all dogs, are predators, and all dogs have the potential to behave badly, especially when operating as a pack. Dogs capable of killing a 150-pound buck or bringing down a 500-pound steer would have little trouble inflicting fatal wounds on a 2-year-old child. Whether the breed is an 80-pound Labrador or an 80-pound Pit Bull has little to no bearing on the injuries. The determining factors are the intent and the bite inhibition of the individual dog. To address fatal attacks as a Pit Bull-specific problem invalidates the hundreds of deaths caused by other dogs. This approach renders any lessons we may have learned from all non-Pit Bull attacks useless or of no intrinsic value in the understanding of canine aggression. There are lessons to be learned from all fatal attacks, lessons which can only be gleaned from examination of all the available data, not just the cases which involve a single breed. The Pit Bull dominance factor, or, if a Pit Bull, or Rottweiler, is in the pack, the other dogs don't count. This is perhaps the single best argument for the unreliability of breed statistics. It also happens to be the single most compelling argument for the extreme bias of the media. While the media and others are guilty of broadly interpreting and applying the term Pit Bull to dogs of very questionable breed, the omission of dogs other than Pit Bulls, or Rottweilers, in the reporting of attacks is nothing short of disreputable. The media, and others, repeatedly give no recognition to breeds in multiple dog attacks unless they are of Pit Bull or Rottweiler descent, even when it is proven the non-Pit Bull or non-Rottweiler dogs participated in the attack. To demonstrate how single-minded the media is in reporting breeds, and how inaccurate statistics can be on dog attacks, in the past 4 years alone, 2002 to 2005, 11 dogs involved in fatal attacks with no Pit Bull characteristics were counted as Pit Bulls, while their true breeds were not reported, and 3 dogs that were clearly not Rottweilers were identified as Rottweilers. Even more distressing is that in the media's haste to report Pit Bull or Rottweiler attacks, 3 human deaths were attributed to dogs, 2 cases were reported to be Pit Bull attacks and 1 case was reported to be a Rottweiler attack, when, in reality, the cause of death of these individuals was later determined to be from causes other than dog bites. Even if we increased the accuracy of breed identification, hence statistics, by subtracting the number of falsely reported Pit Bulls, and adding corrected breed identifications, the results are still unacceptable. Even though, in the above examples, photographs of the animals were examined and animal control personnel and law enforcement were consulted for the breed identifications, the breed identifications were still admittedly guesswork. It is as unreliable to classify/count Pit Bull mixes as Pit Bulls as it is to classify/count Labrador mixes as Labrador Retrievers. Bear in mind, all previous statistical studies on fatal dog attacks, Winkler, Pinckney, and the CDC, have relied on newspaper articles for breed identification. The frequency of media-reported errors in breed identification is so great, and biased, as to render all numbers on breeds obtained from media sources invalid. The CDC studies in Pit Bull statistics. The oft-touted and well-known study by the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, breeds of dogs involved in fatal human attacks in the United States between 1979 and 1998, 13 has been quoted, misquoted, cited, misread, and misunderstood on a regular basis by politicians, attorneys, the media and others looking for a soundbite or quick solution to a complex problem. The CDC study, if read in its entirety, explains in detail the inherent problems in attempting to calculate breed involvement in fatal attacks. The CDC further explained that a major flaw in their study was the inability to factor in total breed populations relative to breed-related fatalities. The CDC concluded that fatal attacks are so rare as to be statistically insignificant in addressing canine aggression. Despite these inherent flaws, the numbers of particular breeds involved in fatal attacks, as put forth in the CDC study, are continuously used as evidence of the danger of certain breeds of dogs. Ignoring the claims of the CDC that the number of dogs involved in fatal attacks cannot be used as a basis for legislation to address dangerous dogs, many individuals, organizations, courts, and communities continue to cite the numbers of breeds involved in fatal attacks found in the CDC studies. The number most frequently cited from the CDC study is that 66 fatalities, more than any other breed/type, were attributed to pit bull-type dogs over a 20-year period from 1979 to 1998, or approximately 3 deaths per year from dogs reported to be pit bulls. This number has repeatedly been used as statistical evidence as to the dangerousness of pit bulls. However, consider the statistics on child deaths from physical abuse versus child deaths from dog bites. In both of these examples, the first two statements are factual. Fact: in 2002 over 420 children were killed as the direct result of physical abuse by a parent or a guardian. This number does not include death from neglect. Point 14. Fact: the majority of physical abuse deaths of children were inflicted by fathers or father-type men, stepfathers, live-in boyfriends. 15. Conclusion: therefore, fathers are, statistically, the most dangerous of all persons. Fact: in 2005, 16 children were killed by dogs. 125. Fact: the majority of the dogs responsible for these fatalities were pit bulls, pit bull-type dogs or pit bull mixed dogs. Conclusion: therefore, pit bulls are, statistically, the most dangerous of all dogs. Why does the first conclusion sound ridiculous and the second sound reasonable? We've all been exposed to fathers, either our own or other people's, and we know from personal experience that they are not all potential child killers. Also, even though most people are not statisticians, on some level we understand that variables are missing or other factors are not taken into account before coming to this obviously faulty conclusion. Not all people are exposed to pit bulls and therefore have no frame of reference of personal knowledge, which would make the second conclusion appear as absurd as the first. People unfamiliar with pit bulls often rely on information presented to them through the media to make an assessment about the nature of pit bulls. But when the media or politicians talk about vicious pit bull attacks, and hundreds of people write in telling of their friendly pit bulls, no one wants to hear it. Reporters and politicians have been heard to say, "Don't tell me about your friendly pit bulls." In reality, what they are saying is, "Don't inform me of the behavior of 1,000 or 10,000 pit bulls, because I want to base my theories on the behavior of 10 or 20 dogs and then present this to the public as evidence of my belief." The non-pit bull owning public then accepts this skewed and biased presentation as reliable information, and the second conclusion does not appear as absurd as it really is. Anyone admitting that the first conclusion, fathers are the most dangerous persons, is an invalid one based on the data presented has to acknowledge that the second conclusion, pit bulls are the most dangerous dog, is also invalid based on the data presented. Yet, This is the exact data and faulty conclusion which are used to prove how dangerous pit bulls are. No reasonable person can believe that the extreme behaviors of a small group can be used to define an entire population, whether it is fathers or pit bulls. Additionally, to demonstrate how most people's belief that pit bulls cause the most child fatalities are skewed by the media, the years 2002, 2003 or 2004 could not be used in the above comparison, as the pit bull was not the breed responsible for the majority of child fatalities during any of those years. Temperament and unpredictability. Perhaps the most difficult problem facing the pit bull today is the image that the breed is unpredictable and unstable. This has come about largely through the intense media focus given to a number of cases in which owners have encouraged or permitted their dogs to engage in dangerous behaviors. These are the dogs that then become representative of the breed. However, for every pit bull that attacks someone, there are tens of thousands of his brethren that tolerate all the conditions humans place them in, from loving homes to horrific conditions of abuse, without ever biting or attacking. There are no highly publicized reports or scientific journal articles on the behaviors of these dogs. The tolerance of pit bulls in extremely abusive situations is almost never reported or given recognition by the scientific community or the public. Only a few of these long-suffering dogs can be found as a footnote in a report on a completely unrelated matter or in newspaper articles or reports of dog fighting and cruelty investigations. Yet, the behaviors of these dogs are the behaviors which define the breed. The hundreds of thousands of dogs that reside in homes with small children, elderly persons, from doting owners to distracted owners, from abusive owners to demented owners. Millions of examples can be given of loving, loyal pit bulls, but these are usually of little interest to most people. The following examples are the type that does interest us, though these stories are of monsters and monstrous acts, only it is not the pit bulls who are the monsters. In 2004, a sad story begins with the discovery of a dead child inside a bag on the steps of a New York City church. Investigation reveals the dead boy was placed there by his father, who claimed he did not call 911 because he had outstanding warrants. Further investigation has the father admitting to hitting the 3-year-old to stop the boy's seizures. Photographs of the apartment where this child lived with his 3 siblings reveal filthy, roach-infested rooms, with dirty water covering the bottom of a corroded tub, and flies buzzing around decaying food. Prior to his death, this 3-year-old child, with cerebral palsy and a history of seizures, resided with the most minimal care in an uninhabitable apartment along with 4 loose pit bulls. In 2003, a 15-month-old girl died in Lucas County, Ohio. The newspapers reported the child had suffered multiple broken bones, a head injury, and abdominal trauma. The coroner also found the child had recent exposure to cocaine and there was evidence of cigarette burns on the child's buttocks, near her armpit and on the sole of one foot. The mother's boyfriend was charged with inflicting the toddler's injuries. The environment this child lived in prior to her death was one of domestic violence, extreme child abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and criminal activity. The man accused of inflicting the injuries to this child owned a pit bull. The dog's name, Ice, was shaved into the fur on the dog's back. The man's estranged wife told authorities he injected the dog with steroids and this aggressive dog was incited to attack family members at the direction of his owner. Yet, in this horrific climate of abuse and encouraged aggression, it was never the pit bull which harmed this desperate child. The boyfriend, with the silent consent of the mother, was alleged to have abused and tortured this child until it ultimately resulted in her death. There are thousands of these types of stories, enough to convince the skeptics and bore the believers. However, these stories are not accessible to most people, and so the extreme tolerance and stoic nature of these dogs goes unnoticed, while hundreds of articles are printed about the errant behavior of a handful of dogs involved in attacking a person. Pit bull identification. Those who disagree with the ban will say that there will be identification problems. I don't doubt there will be some issues on the margins, but, by and large, I think most people know what a pit bull is. The Toronto Star did a caricature the other week. They had a pit bull on it. I won't say what was underneath the caricature, but everyone who saw that picture knew, everyone who read that caricature knew what that was. That was a pit bull. It didn't say, pit bull, but you knew when you looked at it that it was a pit bull. That's what it was. Attorney General Michael Bryant. This rambling and surreal method of breed identification was uttered by Ontario's Attorney General in his speech during hearings to ban pit bulls in the Canadian province. And if perhaps comparing a dog to a cartoon caricature, is unsuccessful in helping identify whether a dog is a pit bull or not, the Attorney General offered another method. I've said before and I will say again, if it walks like a pit bull, if it barks and bites like a pit bull, wags its tail like a pit bull, it's a pit bull. That is going to apply, I'm sure, to the vast majority of identification cases. If these methods appear to border on the absurd, the proof of this was established when the Attorney General was asked to point out which dog was a pit bull when shown photos of different dogs. Unable to do so, he referred to this as a trick. Apparently the Attorney General isn't the only one tricked by the pit bull. Those in the media also believe it is easy to identify a pit bull, and when they are equally taken to task as to their methodology, resort to similar excuses. Those who have knowledge of dogs and dog breeds understand that breed identification in dogs anything less than purebred is often difficult, if not impossible. Even with purebred dogs, many people could not correctly identify certain breeds. These breeds need not be exotic or rare. Most people would not be able to identify an Australian cattle dog, an Anatolian shepherd, or distinguish between a white boxer and an American bulldog. Even experienced shelter workers, veterinarians, and rescue organization personnel are at a loss to identify certain crossbreeds. Mixing similar-looking, yet distinctive, breeds, such as the Mastiff, Bull Mastiff, Bulldog, Boxer, American Pit Bull Terrier, American Bulldog, Presa Canario, Coonhound, Weimaraner, Rhodesian Ridgeback and even the Chesapeake Bay and Labrador Retriever, would yield a dog that even experts would have difficulty identifying correctly. Mixing Malamutes, Huskies, Wolf Dogs, German Shepherds, Samoyeds, Eskimo Dogs, or any of the northern-type breeds would equally yield a dog in which it would be next to impossible to guess the exact parentage or even predominant breed. However, the media has been able to solve the seemingly complex identification problem with pit bulls. The application of the one-drop rule has made identifying a pit bull an easy task for many in the media. The one-drop rule has long been the standard used in America for determining race. This racially biased theory was based on notions of biracialism. The world is viewed as divided simply into white or black races. The one-drop rule emerged from the Old South and defined any person having any trace of black/Negro blood as black/Negro. Having even a single drop of black/Negro blood determined one's race to be black/Negro. The implication was that African Americans were inherently inferior, therefore any trace of black blood was a pollutant. The field of population genetics now rejects the one-drop rule, recognizing that this system was based on social issues and not based on biology or science. But today the canine equivalent of the one-drop rule is applied to any dog appearing to have any characteristics, blood, of a pit bull. The notion here is also that any pit bull blood pollutes the dog, regardless of degree or ancestral fractions. The canine world is currently viewed as made up of pit bull and non-pit bull dogs. The same principles which allowed for discrimination against African Americans are now applied to dogs. Determining a dog to have pit bull blood allows for the dog to be classified as genetically and socially inferior, allowing for segregation and discrimination. Dogs clearly of very mixed parentage, if involved in attacks, are repeatedly described in the media as pit bulls or pit bull mixes. The insistence on classifying dogs as pit bull or pit bull mixes, even when unable to reference the source of this identification, is clear evidence of the media bias. These very poorly socialized, fearful dogs were repeatedly identified as pit bulls by the media even though they were identified by animal control as Labrador mixes. These dogs were part of a pack of 6 dogs that mauled to death their owner's elderly neighbor in 2001. All 6 dogs were intact, with one of the females giving birth to puppies shortly after the attack. The pack had a history of aggression and were so unsocialized they could not be handled by shelter personnel. From the bloodhound-type dogs to the northern-type breeds to the pit bull-type dogs, accurate identification of specific breeds involved in aggression has always been unreliable at best. However, there is always other information which can be recorded with precision and which yields valuable insight into the circumstances which directly contributed to an attack. For instance, debating whether the dogs that killed a child in 2005 were pit bulls, pit bull mixes or simply mixed breed dogs is an exercise in futility, yielding no definitive results. The information about this attack that can be recorded accurately is: an intact, male dog, found as a stray, usually chained, was brought into the basement for the night. A female dog, usually chained, was brought into the basement with a litter of newborn puppies. The dogs were used by the child's parents for a negative function guard dogs. An unsupervised, 2-year-old child was allowed to enter the basement with the dogs. The owners/parents had a history of drug abuse, use of drugs the night before the attack. The house was found to be uninhabitable and condemned. The owners/parents had a history of animal abuse, 2 of their previous guard dogs had died from heat exhaustion. Whether the dogs involved in this attack had any pit bull characteristics is highly debatable. The facts listed above are not debatable, and this is the tangible evidence which needs to be examined and addressed when searching for the causes and solutions to dog attacks. This dog was repeatedly referred to as the family pit bull in the media and is the female dog cited in the case above. Photo credit, Michael Kestner and the Virginian Pilot.